with temperatures falling to 5 to 9 degrees Celsius. So we pick up on that showery rain then to start the day on Wednesday, affecting central parts of England, and that will continue to track its way eastwards, turning more showery as it does so. And elsewhere across eastern parts of England, again, those showers bubbling up. They could be heavy with a risk of hail and thunder, but with some bright or sunny spells in between. But actually an improving story across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England, where it will turn largely dry and fine through the afternoon, with some lengthy spells of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine as well. So we get through the rest of Wednesday then into the evening and overnight. Many of those daytime showers will tend to fade away and it will turn largely dry, clear as well. One or two mist and fog patches developing, particularly across eastern England where we saw those daytime showers. And again, with light winds, it will turn chilly once again. Widely, we could see temperatures falling 7 to 10 degrees in towns and cities, but colder than that, I think, in more rural spots. So as we can move on to Thursday, then the start of the bank holiday weekend, it's looking like actually a very fine picture across the board. Largely dry and fine, lots of sunshine to start the day, light winds once again. We will see some cloud bubbling up through the day, and that could lead to 1 or 2 showers for northern parts of England, but generally in that sunshine, feeling warm, highs of 15 to 22 degrees. Many areas will stay largely fine through the weekend. Still the risk of some showers though, particularly towards the south.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, the government announces June the 14th, the first flights will start going to Rwanda. And interestingly, Linton on Ouse, where we broadcast from last night, it appears the government are having second thoughts. Interesting, isn't it? Sometimes protest really works. We're going to have the Petrol Retailers Association on. I'm going to ask the question, are we being ripped off at the pumps, especially on diesel? And joining me on Talking Pints, Gay Kellaway, she rode the first winner at Royal Ascot as a female jockey. We'll talk to her about Lester Piggott, his career, what he meant to racing, and she's going to give you the winner of the Derby this weekend. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Well, our breaking news story this hour is that the Prime Minister's been told he must explain why being fined over Partygate isn't a breach of the ministerial code. In a letter to his ethics advisor on the ministerial code, Boris Johnson said he believes that he did not breach it after receiving a fixed penalty notice for breaking his own coronavirus rules. However, Lord Geidt says Mr Johnson must set out his case in public. Well, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has received a questionnaire from Durham Constabulary as they investigate a gathering in work offices for Labour last year. The party confirmed the deputy leader, Angela Rayner, has also been issued with a questionnaire by the police force. Sir Keir has said he will offer his resignation if he's issued with a fixed penalty notice for breaking COVID rules. Well, the other breaking story today, the Home Office has confirmed this afternoon that the first flight carrying migrants from the UK to Rwanda will take place on the 14th of June. The group includes those who've taken dangerous and illegal journeys to enter the UK, including those who've crossed the Channel in small boats. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says the relocation plans will help overhaul the UK's broken asylum system, as well as clamp down on people smugglers. The President of the EU Council says the ban on Russian oil by the EU will cripple Vladimir Putin's war machine. The EU has agreed to stop 90% of oil imports by the end of this year. 10% of imports will be temporarily exempt, so Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic can still have access to fuel. A senior Ukrainian official argued the sanctions don't go far enough, but the European Commission chief, Ursula von der Leyen, said they are destroying Moscow's economy.
Most importantly, in the back is, of course, the whole big package of 6 sanctions. And these sanctions are biting hard and are really destroying, and that's the goal, the basis, the financial basis of Putin leading this war and hitting hard the Russian economy.
And just lastly, the Queen has returned to Windsor Castle from a short trip to Balmoral ahead of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations this weekend. Her Majesty travelled to her Scottish home last week. As Buckingham Palace said, she's pacing herself ahead of the busy 4-day weekend of festivities and celebrations. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're bang up to date. And now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. It's the issue that never goes away. They'd like it to in Westminster and many parts of mainstream media, but no, the number of people coming into the country, both legally and illegally, is very rapidly going up the political agenda. And is it any wonder? Today, just a pretty ordinary day in the English Channel, and we can see the scenes from the harbour in Dover this morning. Several boats came across today, and all of them absolutely jam-packed with people. Here's just a small section of people coming in. You'll notice on that boat, they're all young men. Well, of course, that's because 90% of those that cross the Channel are men. Some come across the Channel in boats that actually can make the crossing quite easily. Others, on very much the second-class cheaper service, come in dinghies that are made literally for one journey only. They have plywood glued into the bottom, and the people on them don't even have life jackets. It is pretty extraordinary. And we can see some footage now of one of those boats that crossed the Channel today. And have a look in the centre of that boat. Rather than life jackets, they've got inner tubes from tyres. I mean, quite extraordinary. And a boat that size would have had 40 to 45 people on it. So about 300 crossed the Channel today. It's just an ordinary day. That's another 3 hotels worth. But we get an announcement from the Home Office tonight that on the 14th of June, the first flight to Rwanda will happen. And those that are going on that flight have been informed of that today. Well, we'll see what happens. My guess is there'll be legal challenges under the Human Rights Act. We're still signed up to Europe's ECHR. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe that flight will take off, or if it does, there'll be hardly anybody on it. But equally important is what's happened to Linton-on-Ouse. You'll notice last night we broadcast from there. Mark White, GBNews' home and security editor, was there, and there appears to have been, because of a concerted local protest, a protest from Kevin Hollingrake, the local MP, the local district council, residents. In fact, I got an email overnight from someone that lives in the village saying she was absolutely desperate for something to be done. And now we're told the government may be rethinking this. So my question to you tonight is, does protest work? Farage at gbnews.uk. Mark White is still in Linton-on-Ouse, and he joins me now. Mark, it does appear that widespread publicity, outspoken opposition from the local community, the unsuitability of the site, given that it's a very small, remote village, and what on earth would 1,500 young men do if they're deposited there? It does appear, Mark White, that the Home Office are having a rethink.
Well, they would certainly dispute the term rethink. What they are saying is that there is a pause, a temporary pause, on their plans to send asylum seekers to the RAF base, just about 100 yards that way, just on the edge of the village there. They say that that is for a couple of reasons, really. One, because there is an impending legal challenge. The local authority has given the Home Office notice that it may launch a legal bid. They have cited a number of legal points that they may object to in the courts. And according to the Home Office, they are taking time out to consider those points made by the local authority. In addition to that, though, there are some logistical problems. They wouldn't go into any more detail than that, other than to say some logistical issues, which mean that at the moment it's not possible for them to send the first load of asylum seekers, about 60, who we were expecting to come here today. So that's been put on hold. For how long, we don't know. Clearly, the villagers would love to think that perhaps this is a chink in the armour, that it may be the start of a rethink by the Home Office. Only time will really tell. It's certainly very controversial. They are aware of this, but also, Nigel, they have an imperative to do something about the increasing numbers of asylum seekers coming across every single day, including today, with up to 300 more coming across the channel. 300 more rooms they have to find accommodation for these asylum seekers.
Well, the Home Office do say we're listening to the community, and the community, I think, will feel tonight that actually standing up as firmly as they have might make a difference. But as you say, whether it's Linton-on-Ouse, whether it's a load more hotels, people have to go somewhere, unless, of course, there is a serious disincentive for people to cross the channel, and that, of course, would be being sent to Rwanda. Do you think that flight will take off on the 14th of June, or do you think the legal challenges are likely, given the current law, to succeed?
I think the government are determined to try to ensure that that flight does take off, but they also acknowledge, and they say it in the news release that they put out today, that there will be legal challenges likely to have been sparked from these notices that have been passed to an unspecified number. Now, we were told about 100 asylum seekers had been put on initial notice of the possibility they could be going to Rwanda. We then heard that it may have been whittled down to about 50, and these include people who've come across on small boats across the English Channel. But they won't confirm what the exact number is at the moment. They're determined that it should be a flight going out on the 14th of June. But if it gets into the courts, you and I know that that could be in the court process in the various different courts for some considerable time. The lawyers will be mounting up there to challenge. If one appeal goes down, there'll be another appeal launched. That's the way it works with asylum seekers generally, who are trying to fight their deportation back to their home country. So you can expect a similar type process, probably, with regard to the process to send them to Rwanda.
Yeah, no, I suspect so too. Mark, thank you for staying up there in Linton-on-Ouse and giving us great reporting. Thank you very much indeed. And I just doubt this will happen. I mean, after all, just recently we weren't able to deport somebody who actually was a known torturer. It took us years to get rid of Abu Qatada. We need to rethink our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights and the Human Rights Act in this country, which incorporates it into law. We don't need any lessons from anyone in Europe about freedom and liberty. ever since Magna Carta, we've enjoyed it far more than any other country in Europe. And I do feel, I must say, very strongly about that. Now you'll have noticed it now costs 100 quid. It costs a ton to fill the car up if you've got a diesel car. Some people now predicting that diesel car sales will go into a terminal decline. Equally, and we've been covering the cost of fuel here on this programme consistently for the last few weeks, but equally now, even the government are looking into, was the 5p cut in duty actually handed on to consumers? And that on a day when unleaded is averaging just over 170 pence a litre and diesel is now nearly 183 a litre. What is going on? Are we being ripped off? Well, to answer all of that is Gordon Balmer, Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association. Gordon, welcome back to the show. Now, you know the charge. You know the charge. It's coming from the press. It's been picked up by Number 10. And Gordon, you're ripping us off. That's what they're saying.
Quite the contrary, actually. Our members are not ripping them off. In fact, if you actually took a delivery of fuel today for petrol, for example, and you were priced off of yesterday's price, so a lagged basis from yesterday's price, you'll be actually making a loss if you're one of our retailers. So quite the contrary. And we have offered on a number of occasions to go and meet with the government to actually explain how prices work. But to date, we're yet to hear back from them.
Yeah, and I noticed today that Brent crude was up at $123 a barrel. This is after the EU have announced drastic reductions. I mean, whether it actually happens or not remains to be seen, but drastic reductions in the amount of Russian oil that they buy. I'm a bit sceptical about that. But look, I get the point, you know, that crude is at a very, very big price. But there's one question, Gordon, that really, really vexes me, and I cannot get a straightforward answer to, and it's simply this. If I look at the wholesale price for petrol and the wholesale price for diesel, and I've got these figures today from the RAC, they're bang on the money with where prices are, I see that the wholesale price for petrol is 144p a litre, and the wholesale price for diesel is 134p a litre. And Howard Cox of the Fair Fuel campaign put us onto this a few weeks ago. So just to repeat for everybody, in simple terms, diesel is 8p a litre cheaper at wholesale where your members buy it, and yet is 10 to 15 pence more expensive at the pump. How? Why?
Well, I don't recognise those numbers because the last numbers I've got on the wholesale price, which don't include all the costs, actually, 146 for petrol and 143 for diesel. So we can debate numbers all day, if you like, but I don't recognise
well, I mean, these, Gordon, these came from the RAC foundations, and I've been following their numbers for a few days. So you're saying these figures are wrong?
I'm saying that I don't recognise their numbers. We get our numbers direct from the S&P Global, who monitor product prices each day. I mean, you're a former commodities broker, I understand. You know how commodities markets work. And we get the numbers direct from the trading desk. So we can have a discussion about numbers with the RAC, but this is, again, where we want to actually speak to the government because they seem to be taking advice from essentially a motoring organisation. Perhaps they'd like to come and talk to the professionals. OK, so let me ask you the question again, very simply, Gordon. Why is diesel so much more expensive than unleaded petrol? Well, there are additional costs on diesel which are not factored in. For example, one of the big costs that the RAC ignore is the cost or the decrement to our members' margins on fuel cards, because we don't actually sell fuel to a lot of businesses, particularly haulage firms, at pump price. They're priced at a vastly lower price from which our members actually earn a lower margin. So that actually decrements the margin as well. Well, but that's a different issue, isn't it? I mean, what you sell diesel to haulage firms at is a different question. My question is, why is Joe Public paying so much more for diesel? I still haven't really got to the bottom of this. Well, we import around 20% of our diesel from Russia. And unfortunately, the quote is going to exclude Russian product from tomorrow, in fact. So I'm afraid the cost of diesel will increase. Now, if I actually look at the cost of diesel today, it's actually increased by another 3.7 pence per litre over yesterday, unfortunately.
I mean, is this partly because we've closed down so much of our own refining capacity?
Well, it's not necessarily just that. It's because a lot of our refineries are set up to produce gasoline. So we've had to import a lot of diesel. 40% of our diesel is imported. Yeah. And a lot of that was from Russia. So obviously companies are now having to find alternative sources. And again, that is driving price.
OK. Well, Gordon Barmer, Executive Director of the Petrol Retailers Association, I want you to look the GB News viewers in the eye and tell them that the 5p duty has been passed on and that they're not being ripped off.
Categorically, the 5p duty has been passed on and you're not being ripped off.
Gordon, thank you very much indeed for joining me today on GB News.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the moral of the story there on diesel is just the same as with so many arguments over energy in this country. The mad dash to go green, to show the world how virtuous we are, means not only are we not self-sufficient in terms of gas and oil, but we've even closed down so many of our refineries, and we're happy for countries like Russia to do it for us on diesel and import it from there. And we wonder why now we're in a mess. For all the time we need to use fossil fuels, and let's hope the amounts we need go down. But for all the time we need to use fossil fuels, we should be self-sufficient in production and in refining capacity as well. And if the government don't learn that, then they don't deserve, frankly, to win the next election. Not that I'm confident Labour get it either. And as a result of joint stupidity of successive governments, we now see a Times front page yesterday saying to us that 6 million households could face power blackouts this winter. It's almost inconceivable in a digital computer age that governments could have been so stupid. We'll find out more about that in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A community, a local council, an MP united in anger in Linton-on-Ouse, and the government now, well, perhaps delaying things just a little bit. I'm asking, does protest work? Because it seems to me, I mean, the truth of it is, if it's not Linton-on-Ouse, it will be somewhere else, and other people will complain. But it does seem to me that when communities do club together, have a degree of unity, and perhaps quite a loud voice, they can actually get things changed. Your reaction to this? Elliot says, protesting draws attention to issues, but after you have people's attention, you need to convince them that you have a good case. Yep, I get that. And their argument, of course, is we're miles away from anywhere. We're a tiny little place of just a few hundred people. What on earth are 1,500 young men going to do all day? And that's the logic of the argument they're putting. And actually, I saw similar to this down at Barton Stacey, a disused army camp down in Hampshire. Similarly, the local village, tiny, miles from anywhere, and it appears that one isn't going to happen. Another viewer says, definitely not if it involves blocking motorways or slashing tyres. No, I wasn't arguing for violent protest. I was arguing for united, solid, logical, peaceful protest. Giles says, no, it does not. There is no way our culture should allow violent protest and disruption to others. Policy changes can only take place through peaceful discourse and campaigns. Folks, don't misinterpret me. I wasn't arguing violent protest. I was arguing peaceful protest. And think about, insulate Britain. Actually, their actions haven't convinced a single person to support their cause. If anything, it's been the opposite. Matt says, it works about as well as voting. Bit of cynicism there. And Jonathan says, I disagree with protests that are violent or involve disruption to others. The right to protest must continue. And I think that's what's been happening on Linton-on-Ouse. There's not been a scintilla of violence or threats of any kind, but a community and their elected representatives who have been united. Now, I said before the break that it's almost unthinkable, is it not, in 2022, that we could even be thinking about the rationing of energy or blackouts. I mean, we're an island built on coal. We've got huge, vast gas reserves, oil reserves in the North Sea. We're becoming the Saudi Arabia of wind, according to our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, which is all well and good when the wind blows, but not so clever when it doesn't. How on earth can it be that in this digitised age, we face the threat of up to 6 million houses going without power by this October? I think it is the sheer stupidity of successive British governments, both Labour and Conservative and the Coalition. But joining me to discuss this is Malcolm Grimston, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Environmental Policy at Imperial College London. Malcolm, how can this be? Explain, please.
It's worth saying that this is what they call a credible worst case. I'll be extremely surprised if it actually goes that far. It would take an awful lot of things going wrong at the same time to get there. But of course, as you're implying, the costs of not fulfilling secure electricity supplies are absolutely horrendous in a modern economy. Even a few seconds of outage can mean you've got to reboot all your systems. And longer outages, of course, cause problems for people getting into work, for hospitals, for all the things that we rely on for our lives. So we do have to take a very cautious approach. I think you've really described it. For many years, many of us have been saying we need to continue investing in secure power supplies, nuclear being the obvious example, supplies that will be on whether the wind's blowing or the sun's out, and don't leave us enormously dependent on imports of oil and gas from countries which may, and sadly have, proved not to be as friendly as perhaps we might have hoped. So that's why we've ended up now. There is a dreadful trade-off in energy. You need secure supplies, economic supplies, and environmentally acceptable supplies. And the problem is hitting all those three nails at the same time is very, very difficult. And keeping three plates in the air is tough. In the early years of this decade, we really only looked at environment, and I don't think that was helpful. Now we're recognising that the others are just as important.
So in a sense, what you're saying, Malcolm, is that this is wargaming for the worst-case scenario.
Well, the grid companies and Ofgem have to do this every year. And in fact, this isn't the first time we've had warnings that what they call the capacity margin, that's the spare power that we don't think is going to be needed, but might be if things turn out very bad, a very cold winter, very little wind. That happened last year and the like.
Yeah. But, you know, we have a war going on in Ukraine. We have a sanctions regime against Vladimir Putin. We've heard Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected boss of the European Union, telling us today the sanctions are really biting, she said. Well, yes. I look at the oil price and the gas price, and I wonder whether the sanctions aren't biting us a bit more than they're biting Vladimir Putin. And I just wonder, you know, if he was to turn the taps off, it is conceivable, isn't it, that we wouldn't get enough gas to back up our system in, say, February, when a large anticyclone might sit over the UK and the wind turbines don't turn.
Yes, I mean, the credible worst case is worse this year than it was last year for those very reasons. It still requires all those things to happen. I wouldn't want people to panic about this, but I do hope this is a wake-up call to us, that if we don't look at the long-term issues as well as the short-term crises, we'll just have a string of short-term crises. In the 1970s, the last time that we saw massive oil price increases, it took really 10 years for that to work through the system as we started investing in alternative energy. So we're likely to get there, but it's a shame that we find ourselves in this situation, despite history showing us what happens.
Yeah, shame is one word. Disgrace and total mismanagement might be another way of looking at it. But of course, as part of contingency planning, what we do is to have strategic reserves. I know many countries have huge strategic reserves. Indeed, in America, President Biden has been releasing some of their strategic oil reserve. But as I understand it, our strategic reserve for gas, which is absolutely necessary to back up wind when it doesn't work, is the Rough deposit up on the East Coast. And we have about, am I right in saying, 2 to 3 days of strategic backup?
Yes, I mean, to be fair, when we had large amounts of gas coming out of the North Sea reserves were their own storage reserve. We could take gas and increase, perhaps not in a day or two's time, but we could increase output from the North Sea. Now, of course, North Sea reserves are getting depleted, not quite as fast as we thought, but they are nothing like they were 15 years ago. And that's why the need for storage has grown in that time. And we did close most of the Rough capacity in 2017, because at that stage, it looked like gas around the world was going to be no problem. Huge reserves were being discovered all the time. It just goes to show that if we take short-term views of energy, then very quickly we find ourselves in potentially, it says only potentially, but potentially in a very difficult situation indeed.
And is this a problem of a lack of strategic forward planning? Is this because politicians who are energy ministers, environment ministers, are thinking about the next election and not where the country needs to be in 10 years' time? Is that perhaps part of this problem?
Yeah, I mean, what I think happened was, with the liberalisation of energy in the late 1990s or through the 1990s, the mantra then, and Nigel Lawson said it in 1982, was just to treat energy and electricity like any other commodity. The market will decide. But at the same time, understandably, government has constantly intervened in that market to have non-market outcomes around secure supplies and around environment in particular. And it seems to me we've probably had the worst of both worlds. On the one hand, the government doesn't have the powers it used to be able to take the decisions itself. But on the other hand, industry is nervous about taking those decisions in case it makes the investment and then faces a price cap or it faces a windfall tax that it can't plan for, because governments respond in a fairly capricious way in this sort of way. And I've said before, if we entirely left things to the market and the market had confidence that it could invest, we'd probably be okay. If government took the reins fully and said, right, we're in charge of this and we're going to procure energy from the private sector, that would work okay. But trying to set up a market and then intervene in it at such depth that it can't operate, that's where I think the fundamental problem has been.
And a final thought, Malcolm, if I may, on the windfall tax, which would put the tax on profits of the North Sea at 65% for these companies. It's been applied retrospectively to profits made within the course of the last year. What does this mean for future investment in any form of energy within our country?
Well, inevitably, it can't be good for it. You can't just look at a single year of a company like BP or Shell when their investments have a 30-year horizon. 2 years ago, BP posted a loss over the whole year. This year, once it's written off its Russian assets, it may well be very close to posting another loss today. And I can understand the politics, particularly when so many people are genuinely suffering terribly because of these prices. But this is a short-term source of energy. But it goes back to what I was saying. You can't just look at the short term. You've got to look at the long term. And if you are saying to these companies, invest if you like, but if you make a decent return at any point, we're going to take it off you. We shouldn't be that surprised if the company is then to say we might decide to go somewhere else.
No, absolutely. Malcolm Grimston, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. And interestingly, that point about, if you make a lot of money and do well, as an investor in this country, as a company here operating, that we could put a super tax on you, doesn't just apply to energy, it could apply to simply any possible sector. And how is that good for investment? How is that good for growth? How is that good for well-paid jobs? And all of this to raise a maximum of £2 billion, which may sound a lot, but in the scheme of things isn't very much. I think it's absolutely crazy. Now, what the Farage? I've mentioned it already today. Yeah, it's Ursula von der Leyen. And there she is standing up and saying that EU leaders are now going to do their bit. Yes, they're going to reduce the amount of oil from Russia coming into the European Union by 90% by the end of the year. All seabound oil will stop, but the pipeline that comes into Hungary and feeds other countries, neighbouring Hungary, that will continue. So you can believe the European Union on this if you choose to. I would have thought there's about as much chance of this happening as there is the Germans keeping their promises to give some tanks to the Ukrainians, which simply hasn't happened. Now, Russian state media is always a source of amusement or fear, depending on how you view these things. But Vladimir Sovolov, who's dubbed Putin's voice, every week he makes some outlandish comments about the United Kingdom on his show, and this was the beauty from yesterday.
Смотря как то вести будет. Может когда остановитесь? Ну, когда надо, тогда остановимся. А где остановимся? Ну, я вот сегодня говорил, может быть, Стоунхендж. Ну, Листрат же говорит то, что это она воюет.
So there we are, Stonehenge. I guess it must be Stonehenge because we had the image, didn't we, of the Queen from each decade of her rule put up on the stones of Stonehenge. I don't think we'll take it too seriously, although, of course, humour is nearly always based on some sense of true intent. Some more thoughts and reactions on what's going on Linton on Ouse. One viewer says, nothing works anymore, not even the petition site. Governments just do what they want to, regardless of the people. That's the joy of two-party systems. Socialist globalism, here we come. There we are, he's given in. Another says, the idea we should wait every 4 or 5 years to just use the ballot box is laughable. I've never protested, but as this government gets less democratic by the day, protesting becomes a civic duty. I have to say, folks, I do believe there is a way around this, and I do believe in direct democracy. No, genuinely, I do. You see, it was having a referendum on EU membership that gave us Brexit. Parliament would never, ever have done it in a month of Sundays. And I actually think that rather like Switzerland, we should have the right on very big issues. If several million of us sign a validated petition, we should have the right to say to Parliament, we'll make the big decision on this issue and not you. And I think that would be good for our democracy and good for the sense of knowing that actually we really are in charge, because we're the masters, the people in Parliament are the servants. Anderson says, no, same as public petitions on the government website, kind of pointless. Yeah, they talk about these petitions, but they have no actual force. And finally, Philip says protesting only works when it coincides with the agenda of governments and powerful interests. An exception to this, of course, was Brexit, which is why the establishment is still so angry about it. That is because, Philip, it was taken out of their hands. They feared a rise of an insurgent politician. He's looking at you down the camera and talking to you on the radio right now, and he had to be stopped. The only way to stop him was to give people a referendum, and they thought the people would listen to their elders and betters, but we didn't. We rebelled, thank God. Now, it's a big week. It isn't just the Jubilee, but of course it's the Epsom Derby coming up on Saturday. And I've got somebody coming on this show in a moment on Talking Pints who's going to give you the winner of the big race on Saturday. It's Gay Kellaway. She'll be here in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on the Mark Steyn Show, Eva Vladingerbroek is here to discuss freedom of movement, or the lack thereof. Radio show host Dana Loesch joins live from Texas to discuss gun laws and law enforcement. Plus, as we approach the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, Peter Hitchens will be on hand to share his thoughts on the monarchy. All of that and more on the Mark Steyn Show, tonight from 8 o'clock.
It's that time of the day. Yes, the GB News Tavern has been declared open. The bell has rung, and I'm joined by Gay Kellaway, retired jockey, now racehorse trainer. Gay, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
To Talking Pints.
This is Nigel Zero beer. I don't drink.
I believe you. I believe you. We don't force people to drink, but it's just the idea that we have a chat over a drink. Before I get to your life with horses, we must begin by talking about one of the greats. And I remember growing up and kind of family conversations, what's Leicester Piggott going to ride in the Derby? And he was just this giant of horse racing. I mean, his career, it spanned nearly half a century in the saddle. And just your thoughts on Leicester, what he meant to racing.
He meant a great deal to everyone. I mean, he was a hero. The old lady off the street would always say, no Leicester Piggott. I was fortunate to spend a lot of time with Leicester when I was a kid, because I rode as an apprentice during the years of Leicester's, you know, real height. I mean, I remember the first derby I ever watched on TV from school was the Minstrel. The nuns let me watch the derby.
It's unusual for a convent to allow you to watch a horse race.
Yeah, I know, they did, because they knew I was mad on horse racing, so my dad was a jockey. Anyway, so I was lucky and very, very fortunate. Spent a lot of time with Leicester. He was quite a character, and I think he amused himself so much in seeing people's discomfort around him. He had a very sort of very quick, quirky sense of humour. I remember one day I was in the car with him. Sally, his secretary, was driving the car back from the races, and he obviously got beat on a favourite, and he had his window down. It was a hot summer's day, and we didn't have air conditioning in those days. And a punter came along and tried to grab him round the neck, and he just said, "Drive on." And the punter was running along. It was so funny. I was sat in the back of the car. I was only about 18, and he was running along, and Leicester just a wry grin on his face. I mean, that was Leicester. And it was a nightmare for many trainers because he used to do his own thing on the gallops. He hardly ever wanted to spend much time on a horse. He never went... If the trainer told him to go a mile, he'd only go 1,000 metres. You know, Leicester never went very far. He used to cut across the gallops, drive the gallopmen mad because he went all over the closed ground. I used to stick right up his backside because I knew
when you're
Leicester
a genius, you can do things your way in life.
And he knew straight away. I remember he used to be one side of the gallops in Newmarket, ride one horse that was fancied for the Derby, then disappear and go to the other side of the gallops, all in a space of half an hour, and ride two horses that were fancied for the Derby, but he knew which was the best ride.
Yeah, I met him once for lunch. I didn't know him as well as you did, but he was, 4,493 winners, 9 Derbies he won, which is absolutely astonishing. And it's the Derby this weekend. The Queen, we've got this wonderful Jubilee celebrations coming up. Thursday's going to be great in London. The weather forecast is good, trooping the colour, 70 aeroplanes, the Queen on the balcony, all of that's great. She's not going to be at Epsom, we're told. But you know the winner of the Epsom Derby, don't you? Oh, look, I've told everybody that you know the winner.
Well, here's the thing. It's a very apt name. Desert Crown would be the favourite. Young jockey that's never ridden a winner of the Derby, Richard Kingscote. Sir Michael Stoute has had several winners of the Derby.
Yep.
Desert Crown is a very apt name. We've also got Aidan O'Brien, who's he's nearly just one short of having as many Derby winners as Leicester. A brilliant trainer from Ireland. He's got Changing of the Guard. Or Stone Age. I like the horse Stone Age. Changing the Guard has a bit of advantage over all of them because he's won over the distance. And Aidan O'Brien sort of throws up a few long shots over the years. He had a big long shot winner many years ago. Whereas Stone Age is a front runner, which will suit the Derby course. So there's a few in it, but I'd go for the name. It just would be great.
Well,
also, Sir Michael has a runner for the Queen on the same day. Hasn't got a run in the Derby. He's got Just Fine. And, of course, the closest the Queen has come to a winner in the Derby is Oriole. That's probably the best horse she's ever owned. In 1953, when it was Coronation Week, and she finished second to Pinzer.
That's right.
So that's the closest the Queen's ever
the Queen's
come
never
to.
won the Derby.
No, sadly.
No, she's kept the other crown, but she's never had the Derby one.
That's right.
And Gay, we talk about Leicester, and about jockeys and a life of jockeys, and you loved horses clearly growing up. It was your obsession. You wanted to be a jockey, and you were age 17 a jockey, and a woman in very much a man's world, but similar challenges in one way, because Leicester was 5'8" or 5'8" and a bit, so he wasn't exactly a tiddler in terms of height, and managed to live his adult life 2 stone underweight, living on a diet of champagne and cigars, basically. I mean, when you wanted to be a jockey, how does a jockey live? How does a jockey eat? You've got to keep your weight to a ridiculous level, haven't you?
Fortunately, things have changed a bit more. Jockeys are taller, bodies have changed, so we've upped our weights over the years. But in my day, and Leicester's day, how Leicester lived to 86 is beyond me. He used to live on a glass of champagne and a cigar. He really was so dedicated. And most of the jockeys in my era, we used to have to... We called it wasting. Dieting was called wasting, because you did have to really reduce weight. And, I lost a stone. I was light anyway. I was 8 stone, but I went down to 7 stone, something like 7 stone 4. And I was riding like 49 kilos. And, we had to really... And our weights were lower. Like, with the lowest weight riding was 7 stone.
So what was your diet when you were racing competitively?
Not a lot. And we didn't have We didn't have dietitians. You didn't have mental health problems in those days. You had to get on with it. And I had a lot of bullying and harassment when I was riding in the 80s.
Is that because you were a woman in a man's world?
A little girl, probably. And they used to, Willie Carson used to, say, like, oh, don't get beat by the girl on Pat Edgery. But Leicester was so professional. And he said to my dad, he said, yeah, she rides well, this girl, you know, she's got good hands and she'd make a jockey. And he always gave me advice, you know. Lester was never chauvinistic. He was a very, very kind person. You know, deep down, a very kind man. He was always very, very kind to me and always used to say, oh, follow me or, you know, give me a bit of advice. So
He had some other problems with money and tax, and we know about
just
that.
careful with money, that's all.
Well, I think that's...
I never ever saw him pay for anything. He always made me laugh when he made everybody pay, even for
I think the
ice
judge
cream.
took a different view, but never... And Gay, you know, you were the first woman to win a race at Royal Ascot.
Yes, the Queen Alexandra. And fortunately, I was able to buy my own stables 18 years ago, and I renamed the stables the Queen Alexandra Stables. A horse called Sprowston Boy, owned by coal miners. They couldn't believe it. They were stood in the paddock with the Queen. You know, even...
Could you believe it?
I thought the horse was very good, and it wasn't. We didn't have social media in those days. It wasn't such a big deal, you know, Nigel. And basically, you just got out and did the job. And I thought I disobeyed my dad's orders. He trained the horse, and I thought I'd just kick on this horse. I knew he stayed. It was heavy ground. He ended up being a very good hurdler. So I thought I'd just kick on and from Swinley Bottom, and I just kicked and kicked and kicked and kept riding and riding, and I looked round, I couldn't believe how far I was ahead.
You did it.
Anyway. Greville Starkey, Pat Eddie, Willie Carson, Esther, all behind me. But yeah, no, it wasn't such a big deal. I had headlines in the Sporting Life. Yeah, it would.
And now, of course, racing has a female superstar jockey over the jumps, Rachel Blackmore. I was there. I was at Cheltenham when she won the Gold Cup, the Grand National. Does the racing industry now give women a fair crack at...
Absolutely. I mean, Holly Doyle, for instance, this week she rides in the Oaks. She's got a fancied runner in the Oaks, and she's a marvellous rider. She's wonderful for racing, as is Rachel, and there's some wonderful girls come along. But in my day, we never really got a chance. I mean, I started riding big... You know, after riding a big winner, they weren't knocking me down to put me up because it was still very old-fashioned and, you know, men were riding horses, not women. There was very few stable girls in the stables working, grooms. Where now it's big. I mean, it's 50-50. Even more girls are working in stables than boys. So things have changed. Everything's changed.
And now you're a trainer, so it's still horses.
I've been training for 32 years.
But now you've got to deal with the owners as well, haven't you?
Yes, and it's all about managing people, and I
expectations.
Enjoy expectations.
Because everyone buys a racehorse and thinks it's going to be a champion.
Yeah, but we're all on the same page, so we all want the same thing. But it's great fun. It's great fun. You know, I don't have massively big owners, but we have some lovely people, working class people, have horses with me, and we get together. And the prize money is massive in the UK, so basically, we just have a lot of fun. It's a social thing, and you know, anybody can come and own a racehorse or a share of a racehorse now, and get involved and have a good days out.
Is racing in a good place as an industry?
As an industry in the UK, we have a few problems, like most sports. I think we have a problem massively with the prize money, and it's hard to keep a horse in training for a long time. I sold a good filly not so long ago because I had to. Financial reasons. We can't keep these fillies and our geldings or colts in the stable. We have to sell them on abroad, and they go to Australia, Hong Kong, or even the Middle East now. So the better horses, even Japan, they took our best mares. You know, so it's massively abroad and bigger money, richer people.
It's a real global sport, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it employs an awful lot of people.
Yeah,
an awful lot of people.
But your love for horses, I mean, you know, not just about riding winners or training winners, your love for horses, the animals, your relationship with them. You know, just share with our audience the mission you've just been on.
Well, you know, when I was sitting watching the news, I could see there was obviously in Ukraine with terrible trauma and war with these poor people, but they also have animals, you know, dogs, cats and horses, and they've lost everything. They've lost their home, they have no jobs, they have no money, and they had left their horses and animals behind. I mean, they lived in hope and just let the horses go loose. And we have a hub just sort of 30 minutes from the border of Ukraine, near Lviv. And what we have a girl called Charlie Thornico, a young girl who took over the hub, English girl, running it. She's from a military background, and she'd been working in charities in the UK. She went over there for 3 days just to help them out. She's been there for 6-7 months now. And she's rescued within a group of us, over 400 horses to get them across the border. And what they have, horses have chips in them and passports, and these people let them loose. And we try and reunite the horses, you know, but they're in a terrible state. You know, even the dogs are in a terrible state. You can imagine.
But I mean, the whole history of, well, animals and war, you know, we now understand more about this than perhaps we used to, but particularly horses in war, you know, horses in war. And for those watching this on television, you can see some of the animals in Ukraine. But horses in war, and I've read accounts, you know, of people serving on the Western Front in the First World War, you know, saying that actually the distress to the animals upset them as much as the distress to their fellow man. I mean, something like 8 million horses died during the First World War. And with the Nazi invasion of Ukraine and Russia, probably even more horses died in World War II. So, you know, horses, mules, donkeys, they've paid a terrible price in war, haven't they?
Yeah, to help mankind.
Yeah.
And it's very, very sad, and it breaks my heart. And we're kind of going through the same sort of thing. But, you know, we rescue people as well as the horses.
Yeah.
We rescued a couple that the daughter, and she had mental health problems through COVID. Her mother and her escaped Ukraine. Russians had invaded their village and they had to flee with their little dog and a horse. And we've managed to get them to our Holland hub, which you've just seen on the TV there, across to Portugal, and found them a wonderful home. And that's a great story, but there's so many, well,
you've done what you can.
All you can do is your bit, can't you?
And you can't do any more.
And the
than
British
that.
really have stepped up more than any other country, believe me, when it comes to the animals. Yeah.
I think in lots of ways Brexit Britain is standing up and giving a lead on many, many things. And will you be at Epsom at the weekend?
I will indeed, yeah. And hopefully the Queen might turn up. You never know.
Do you know what? She actually's looking really well, isn't she? The sort of pictures. I know she's got some mobility problems, but yeah, she might just surprise everybody.
She might surprise us.
Gay, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Nigel.
And talking to us about all things horse. Thank you.
Cheers.
It's time for Barrage the Farage. You send your questions in. One viewer asks me, with everything being cancelled, how long until the woke mob try and cancel horse racing, citing animal welfare? Well, do you know, Gay, I was at Cheltenham Gold Cup Day and there were protesters outside the ground. They want jump racing banned. There's no question about that. Do you fear that for the horse racing industry?
I fear for the... I'm not a jump trainer, you understand. I'm flat.
Yeah.
But I do fear that could come. And when that comes, what else are they going to ban? We'll have no horse racing. And like I say, it's a global enterprise and we employ an awful lot of people.
Yeah, and if they ban jump racing or horse racing, then the horses won't get bred in the first place, will they?
They won't get bred in the first place. And believe me, race horses get a wonderful life.
Yeah.
99% of them, they have a wonderful... It's like 5-star hotels they're staying in.
I believe that. I believe that. With people like you looking after them, I believe that. Alistair asks, Bradford has been named City of Culture. Thoughts? Well, look, I know Bradford quite well. City of Culture, yes, but, you know, I guess people will ask the question, what culture? Let's hope that it's a British culture. Interestingly, though, Bradford, with its big religious and racial mix, Bradford voted leave. So actually, I think Bradford might do rather well. One last question. Robert asks, who do you think was at fault? The Liverpool fans or the French authorities? I have absolutely no idea, but you can see the way the French police things, and thank goodness we live in this country and not in France, is all I can say. I am done for today. I'm back with you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. But I'm going to hand you over now to the capable hands of Mark Steyn.
Hey, thank you, Nigel. Terrific show. And I think, actually, we would all do well to be on Lester Piggott's Champagne and Cigars diet. Not bad to make it to 86 on that. On tonight's Mark Steyn show, we'll talk monarchy with Peter Hitchens, plus a couple of maybe just temporary victories in North Yorkshire and at the UN World Health Assembly. And what happens when the police show up but decline to do any policing? That's all coming up after the weather.
Hello, it was another very showery day across the UK on Tuesday, and it's more of the same as we head into Wednesday then, with a mixture of sunny spells, scattered showers, but it will turn drier from the west. If we look at the pressure pattern then, you can see the reason why. Low pressure centre right across the UK on Tuesday, and that's still hanging around as we head into Wednesday.